The major parts of the top menu here, and what are a couple of things that you might want to make sure that you know straight off the bat. So obviously, you can go ahead and make, if you're in Photoshop already, you can make another new document from there. You can go ahead and open a document that you're looking for here as well, and that works the same as it does in your other programs. The next thing in here that you're going to use more than anything else is save. So I want to just show you what the save command kind of looks like, what it's going to pop up for you when you go to save the first time, especially once you've popped another layer in, because we want to make sure that we save our master files, our Photoshop files, and then obviously after you have finished everything, then you're going to go ahead and you'll save as one of our compressed file formats. But at the very beginning, you're going to want to save. Now you'll notice that I've just stuck another layer in here because I just want to show you what it's going to look like once you've put some things inside of Photoshop. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to navigate to wherever you want to save this. Make sure you save it with a name that makes some sense, because otherwise you're going to go looking for it later and you're going to have Untitled 1 through 20 and you're going to have no idea what you're looking at. So this is going to be my demo poster that I'm going to work on a little bit later with you guys. So I'm just going to save that there, and I want to save it as a Photoshop document. So that's fine. You see the ending here is PSD. So that default is exactly what we're looking for. If you click on format, you can see most of the file formats that we talked about in the print versus screen are shown here, but not the ones that are kind of just screen based. But you can see we've got our large document format, we've got JPEGs, we've got PDFs, we've got RAW, we've got TIFFs. So since I have layers, it's not showing me some of the other options that, as you can see, since I have layers checked, it's not going to show me things that don't support layers. So I'm absolutely happy with the default, which is Photoshop document. That's what I want. So I'm going to click save. Now it's going to pop up this particular box for you, and it wants to make sure that if you want backwards compatibility. So we're working with, as you can see, Photoshop 2020, but maybe you're going to send this to your friend who doesn't have Creative Cloud, or you're sending it to someone who has an older version of Photoshop on their computer they can't update because they've got an older computer. You can, in fact, if you leave this checked, they should be able to open it. There are occasions where you might be using a new tool or new feature that's not available, but for the most part, it's going to make it as compatible as possible. So leave that checked. So you do need to just hit OK, accept that, and then it will save your document to wherever it is you want. And as you can see, the name has gone from Untitled 1 to Demo Poster, PSD, so it's telling me it's a Photoshop document, and it's still CMYK, which is what we're looking for. So just make sure so you're not worried when you see that dialog box pop up. That's totally normal, and that's what it's there for. Edit has most of the things you'd expect. In Edit, you've got your cut, copy, and paste, all that kind of good stuff. The other thing that we're going to use a fair bit is your transform. So here you can go ahead, you can scale things. It does a really good job of doing perspective in Photoshop, so that's definitely something. That and distort are ones that you might utilize a fair bit, along with rotate. Now, one of the things about Photoshop is that most things you can do in Photoshop, you can do it multiple ways. So if you want to scale something or rotate something, I can do that from here within the edit menu, but I can also do it from within my tools. So I just want to make you aware of where there are kind of duplications so that you can do whatever makes the most sense for you. I'm very visual in terms of my learning, so I don't tend to go and do my transforming from the edit menu all that often, because to me that kind of text way, it doesn't stick in my head. I do it if I need to do perspective because that's easier for me to remember. If I'm in the move tool, there is an option available at the very top of this move tool, and that option says show transform controls. If it's not checked, then I'm just going to be able to move my layer around my page, and you can see I've got smart guides on, but I can't scale it, I can't rotate it. But if I check show transform controls, I get those little points on the edge of the box the way that you did inside Illustrator. And now as I move my cursor near to the edge of the box, you can see that the pointer changes to different things. So if I want to rotate it, when it's got the little rotation guy, I can turn it, and you can see it tells me what angle I've turned it. I'm going to undo that. And I can also scale it. Now, the nice thing about Photoshop 2020 is it assumes that you want to scale in proportion. Before, the default was that if I moved this, it would go out of proportion. But now the default is that it stays in proportion, and that makes me very happy. So in this case, holding down Shift is the only way you can do it out of proportion, because by default, it wants to stay in proportion. So that's a wonderful little tool. Now, I tend to leave show transform control on, but if you're doing fine work, you might need it off. So just remember that that's something you can do here, or you can do it from your edit. Image, we already had a look at things like your image size, canvas size, and the mode. So if you go down to image rotation, that's going to move the entire canvas. So if I do 90 degrees clockwise, you'll see the whole canvas move. So rather than rotating that layer, it rotates the canvas. So again, that's why it's an image and it's separate from, say, layer. There are a bunch of adjustments that we can do to our layers inside of image, and there's some really great ones that are in here. I've got another set of slides where I look at how we can use our levels and how we can use things like color balance in order to really affect the images that we have. But I just want to show you that that's where these guys live, and we'll get into those details later. The next one over is your layer menu. Everything that's in here, you can also do in the layer panel over here on the right-hand side. So personally, I tend to work a lot in the layer panel because, again, I'm more of a visual learner. But if there's something you need to do and you remember the name of it, maybe, but not where it lives, you can always go and find it in the layer menus as well. So a lot of these, as you can see, there's a lot of options here, and there's not a lot you can see here. There's contextual menus, just as there were inside of Illustrator. So these four little lines here, that's kind of like those 3 dots that were in Illustrator that tell me that there's more hiding. So if I click here, you'll see that I have a lot of what I just had up here, but for me it's easier to get to from this little thing. But either one works. So I just want to let you know that those two things are together. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about layers, and specifically once we get used to using them. And so a lot of that's more about the practice of actually playing with all the different variables and seeing what they do. Type. We've also got our type tool over here on the left-hand side. Then we can go ahead and we can create a type layer, which is a different kind of layer that you'll see over in the layers panel. And then now you can see that I've got some text in there. I've got a lot of options in terms of what I want to do. The main thing is that you probably want to adjust things like the character, paragraph, that kind of stuff. So once you've got text in there, again, just like I was saying with layers, we have the option to kind of visually see our changes up at the top here. I can change my font. And if there's more options that I want, I can click this little guy here. It looks like a folder, and it's going to pop out the panels that tell me about my character and paragraph. So when we get into our demo, again, we're going to see how this works in practice. But just to let you know that that's where that lives. We're going to look at our selection tools again when we get into our demo, but this is where we can go ahead, oops, sorry about that. And if you want to select based on things like color range, things like that, we can go ahead and use our selection tools. And one that I find particularly useful is select inverse. because if I have an area that I want selected, I'll go into how we do this later. If I want to keep that square and delete everything else, I can go ahead and I can select inverse, and then I'm going to delete everything but the square that I have selected. So for me, that's a very handy little tool. But the other one that's really useful is to select by the color range, and then that helps you pull out maybe a certain area or work on a certain area. Because if you select that, then you can go ahead and edit, say, the color, if there's a thing that's maybe popping a little too much. So those are a couple of options that are available in Select. I have a PDF up that will go through what the various filters are. It's not 100% updated. It's on Photoshop 2019, but there's not too many changes in terms of filters between 2019 and 2020. So you can go ahead and see what each of the filters does to a photograph, because otherwise it could take you ages to go through and try to get a sense of what each of them does. So you can go ahead and take a look at that PDF if you're curious about experimenting with filters. 3D we're not really going to use, but suffice it to say there's 3D rendering. View will allow us to do things like zooming in and zooming out, fitting our whole canvas on the screen. But view is also where our grids, guides, and rulers live. So that's an important thing to remember. I have snapping turned on, so what that means is that if I have a guide in my document, then my layer will want to kind of stick or snap to that guide. If I'm near it, it will kind of act like a magnet and pull it to the guide. So that's something that I have turned on, but sometimes, again, if you're fine-tuning something, you might need to turn it off. We can also go ahead and turn our rulers on and off from here, and you can see as I do that, you can see the rulers on the edge of my page change. I like to have my rulers turned on. Again, for when I'm adding my guides, I find it useful, but you may find that distracting, whatnot. That's where you can turn it on and off. And in Window, we had seen already about being able to change our workspace. There's one other thing in Window that I want to mention, that is we can look at, and we'll look at this in our demo, we can, if we have multiple things open, we can choose how we have them arranged. And the default is to have them be tabs that you can go through at the top, kind of like if you're in your web browser. But also, if there is a window you need and it's missing, you can go ahead and turn it on from Window. Now, just back one step, there's one thing I want to mention about your rulers before we move on to the next section. And that is that you can change what unit you're looking at in your rulers. So here, I'm in inches. Makes sense. It's 11 by 17 poster. But if I'm going to make a Facebook post, well, then inches isn't all that useful. Now, your units for your rulers aren't set document to document. They're set at the level of the application. So sometimes you need to change what units you see on your ruler while you're in the middle of working. So I just want to show you where you can do that. And that's actually in the preferences for Photoshop itself. And you can see there's a whole bunch of them, but halfway down you have units and rulers. So if you click on that, you can see that my ruler is in inches, but I can change that to say pixels if I'm going ahead and working in a document that's for the web. You can see that that's maybe not all that useful in my print document because it's suddenly really, really large, those numbers. So I'm going to go back to inches now, but I just want to let you know that that's a thing you can do. We'll get into using these more, and obviously once you start using them, they're going to make more sense. But if you're looking for something, I want you to be able to come back here and see kind of the overview of where everything lives and how it's organized.